Discrimination against Muslims. Discrimination is defined as the denial of equity based on an unlawful criteria of distinction. It can be either direct or indirect. The terrorist act of September 11th, 2001 forever changed the way Muslims are viewed by Western cultures. That horrific act of violence has created great fear and distrust in Western cultures over the Muslim community. Since the attacks on the World Trade Center, Muslims residing in the United States have experienced violations of economic and political liberties. As of 2010, 6 million Muslims live among an American population of about 300 million. This small minority is the subject of the social anxiety known as Islamophobia. Many of the reasons behind the American misunderstanding of Islam can be traced to media stereotypes. The two most typical Muslim stereotypes are the images of the male Muslim as an Arab terrorist and the oppressed female Muslim. Almost all Muslims are portrayed as Arabs, despite the fact that about 20% of the worldwide Muslim population identifies as Arabs. Muslim women are most often portrayed in burqas or hijab veils. These images of oppressed women and terroristic men stereotypes fail to account for the progress of the Muslim communities. The Muslim community is unique in nature, illustrated by varying regions, ethnic and racial makeup, and political beliefs. These terroristic attacks that started on September 11th have continued to occur. The latest wave of violence has been offered in the name of the Islamic-based group ISIS. There is a large debate as to whether this terroristic group forms a wave of Islamic terrorists and therefore implicates the Muslim faith specifically, or is the reflection of a small splinter group of terrorists. Regardless of your point of view, the incidence of discrimination against Muslims has risen greatly because of these terrorist attacks. The increase of the terrorist attacks has also led to a number of laws to be put in place which discriminate against the Islamic faith and its rituals. One example is forbidding the wearing of the hijab in public places in France. In France, the argument supporting the disallowance of these veils is that face coverings prevent the clear identification of a person and create a greater security risk. The key argument against the ban is that it encroaches on individual freedoms. Given the increased terrorist attacks in France, there is public support to keep the ban on these veils and garments in France. This public support of this discriminatory treatment goes beyond France. In the United States, these are several laws which place added burdens on males of Muslim origin who are on visas in the U.S. The Patriot Act in the U.S. allows for the lawful detention of non-citizens suspected of terrorism without a warrant. It also authorizes new surveillance guidelines for U.S. law enforcement agencies which target Muslims. The CLEAR law was passed to give local law enforcement the power to enforce federal immigration laws. The combined implementation of the Patriot Act and the CLEAR Act has resulted in the increased surveillance of Muslims. This has led to increased anxiety of Muslims in the U.S. and an increase in discrimination and abuses suffered by Muslims. A more serious form of discrimination occurs when it evolves into hate crimes. These hostile acts against an individual or group based on a personal attribute, such as religion, have been on the rise across Western cultures. The number of reported incidents has grown dramatically, but we know from studies that most of hate crimes go unreported to authorities. Politicians and community groups are calling hate crimes a national concern, with pressure from civil rights groups to adapt hate crime legislation. A 1998 study of data on lynchings in the South is particularly interesting for today's political climate. It found that lynching increased when political leaders tried to convince their communities that blacks were the cause of economic problems. The current U.S. environment, blaming Muslims for terrorism, feeds into the same fear mongering that could lead to violent outcomes. In conclusion, Islam is the second largest faith next to Christianity. There are over 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. The terrorist acts of a small group of radicals should not cause a widespread distrust of all Muslims. We must find ways to work toward common solutions and cooperation to stop terrorism, creating fear, distrust, and promoting discrimination of the Muslim world does not advance that cause.